My name is Minnie L. Ross, and I was 22 years old when my graduation party turned into the first real fracture in my family. I didn't think a backyard celebration could carry that kind of weight. I didn't think a microphone, a plastic cup, and a single sentence could change the way I saw my own blood. But that's the thing about families like mine. They don't break all at once. They crack in public, and then they demand you smile while the pieces fall. It was supposed to be a day I remembered for all the right reasons. I had finished my degree and somehow managed to build a small but profitable business while studying full time. It wasn't luck. It was long nights, skipped weekends, and saying no to more parties than I could count. I'd learned how to grind quietly because in my house, attention was currency, and my older brother Alex always spent it like it was his birthright. My mom had gone all out. The backyard looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. White folding chairs lined up under strings of lights, tables covered in blue tablecloths, the smell of roasted chicken and baked mac and cheese drifting through the air. Relatives I hadn't seen in years came out of nowhere. Friends from college, neighbors, even my old high school basketball coach stopped by to shake my hand. For the first time, I felt like all that discipline had meant something, like I had earned the right to stand there and be proud without flinching. Somewhere between the second round of toasts and the cake cutting, Alex drifted toward the microphone. He had that loose, confident walk he uses when he's about to turn the room into his audience. I watched him the way you watch a match near dry paper. You don't know if it will burn, but you know it can. I told myself maybe he'd say something nice, maybe a quick congrats, maybe a story about us as kids that didn't end with me as the punchline. Instead, he raised his cup and said loud and clear, "Let's toast to the family black sheep who somehow got a degree." For half a second, it was like the air split in two, half laughter, half awkward silence. Most people laughed because they thought it was brotherly banter. Some looked at me with those small smirks that say they think there's truth behind the joke. My mom, standing near the grill, smiled like she was proud of him for being funny and said he was just joking. I smiled too. That was the role. Smile, take it, keep the peace. But inside, something cold moved through me because I knew what he was doing. Alex didn't want to congratulate me. He wanted to shrink me back down to size in front of everyone who had come to celebrate me. He wanted my accomplishment to look like an accident, not something I bled for. Alex was 29, no degree, never stuck with a job for longer than 8 months. He was the kind of guy who talked about making it big while borrowing money to cover rent. For the past year, I had been helping him with his latest big idea, a startup he swore was going to take off. I had even agreed to a shared business loan account with him because I thought maybe, for once, he would follow through. I had overlooked missed deadlines, the fact that he never seemed to put in the same hours I did, the casual way he treated money that wasn't entirely his. I told myself it was family. I told myself helping him didn't make me weak. It made me loyal. But humiliating me in front of friends, extended family, and people I barely knew was different. This wasn't just a bad joke. It was a reminder that in his eyes, I would always be the kid sister who got lucky, no matter how hard I worked. I didn't say a word to him that night. I cut the cake, shook more hands, thanked everyone for coming, and pretended the joke rolled right off me. I let the party finish the way my mom wanted it to finish, warm and glossy and believable. And when the last car left and the backyard lights burned down to their last dim glow, I went back to my apartment and sat in the silence. I looked at everything I had built, and I realized something that scared me because it felt so final. If I kept paying for Alex's life, he would keep treating me like I was beneath him. He would keep calling it love, and my mother would keep calling it peace. So I decided something quietly and completely. 3 days later, I called the bank. I froze our shared account. I sent an email to the small development team we had hired for his startup, informing them my funding was done and my involvement was over. I didn't explain it to Alex. I didn't warn him. I didn't give him the courtesy of a conversation, because I had given him a year of courtesies, and he had repaid me with a microphone. The following morning at 8:12 a.m., my phone lit up with Alex's name. He didn't call once. He called at 8:12, 8:14, and 8:17, each time letting it ring until voicemail picked up. By 8:20, my voicemail icon was glowing like a warning light. I listened to the first message. His voice was sharp, confused, already on edge. He wanted to know why our joint loan account was frozen. Why the development team had called him to say all work was paused until payment resumed. Why his startup website was offline. He said I was making everything harder than it needed to be. I didn't respond. I wanted him to sit in that uncertainty, to actually feel consequences without me stepping in to smooth it over. I wanted him to feel what it was like to build a life without using mine as scaffolding. At 9:30, my mom called, which told me Alex had already run to her. She didn't waste time. She said Alex was upset, that I should at least talk to him and sort it out. She claimed he was counting on this for his future, and pulling out now would destroy months of work. I told her the truth. I wasn't financing someone who thought humiliating me in front of family and friends was good comedy. She tried the old lines. He was joking. Don't take it so seriously. You know how your brother is. And when I didn't budge, her voice shifted into something colder. She told me I was punishing the whole family, that my decision wasn't just hurting him. That sentence stayed with me because it showed me what she really believed. She didn't say Alex was wrong. She didn't say he owed me an apology. All she cared about was that I wasn't playing the role I was supposed to. The younger sister who props up the older brother, no matter how little he deserves it. By noon, I decided to take the next step. Alex and his wife lived in a 2-bedroom condo on the edge of the city. Technically, it was in his name, but the mortgage payments had been coming from my account for the past 14 months. It started as a short-term arrangement when they were getting the startup off the ground. But given how things were going, there was no point keeping that arrangement alive. I drove over without telling him I was coming. When he opened the door, he looked like he hadn't slept. His hair was a mess, his shirt wrinkled, and the air inside smelled like stale coffee. His wife sat on the couch with her laptop open, papers spread out like she was doing damage control. The scene wasn't new. Alex lived in chaos and called it momentum, and everyone around him learned to clean up the mess. I didn't sit down. I told him directly, starting next month, the mortgage was on them. No more payments from me. No more. For a second, he didn't say anything. He stared at me like I had switched to another language. Then the excuses arrived like they always did. It was a joke. I was overreacting. I should have known he didn't mean anything by it. He said I was being petty, throwing away years of sisterhood over a few words. I told him we weren't partners anymore. Not in business, not in anything financial. He could run his startup however he wanted, but he would do it with his own resources. He could cut back, take a job, or shut it down entirely. It wasn't my problem anymore. He tried one last angle. He said I was abandoning him, that I wasn't thinking about family. I didn't answer that. I turned and left. Walking to my car, I didn't feel guilt or second thoughts. I felt something closer to relief. It was the first time in years I wasn't carrying his weight on my back. And for a few days, the silence felt like peace. Then my parents called with an invitation to a big family dinner. They said it was important, that everyone needed to be there. My mom made it sound casual, like one of those meals where everyone piles into the dining room and half the conversations happen over each other. But the way she insisted I absolutely needed to be there told me it wasn't just about dinner. This was an ambush. I debated not going. I already knew the script. They would downplay what Alex did. They would call me overly sensitive. They would try to guilt me into unfreezing the account and covering the condo again. But a part of me wanted to see it. I wanted to see exactly how far they were willing to go to protect him, even if it meant breaking me. And I didn't know it yet, but that dinner would be the moment someone finally said out loud what had been true for years, and the whole evening would tip into chaos. I almost didn't go. I stood in my apartment with my keys in my hand, staring at the door like it was a decision point I couldn't undo. My boyfriend, Ethan, watched me from the kitchen doorway. Quiet in that way that meant he was letting me choose, but ready to step in if I asked. He wasn't the type to demand he come along or act like he needed to handle my family. He just asked one simple question that landed heavier than any lecture. "Do you want peace," he said, "or do you want clarity?" I didn't answer right away because the truth was I wanted both. I wanted peace without surrender. I wanted clarity without another scene where I walked out looking like the villain. Ethan came closer, took my hand, and lowered his voice. "Whatever happens," he said, "don't let them rewrite what you lived." That was the thing I was starting to understand. My family didn't just argue. They edited. They took a moment, shaved off the parts that made them look bad, polished what was left, and handed it back to you like it was the real story. And if you didn't accept their version, they punished you for being difficult. So I went. When I walked into my parents' house, the table was already set like they were staging a scene. My mom had gone all out, roast chicken, mashed potatoes drowning in gravy, her garlic bread that could knock a person out from 2 rooms away. The dining room lights were bright, almost too bright, like they wanted everything visible, every expression caught, every reaction recorded in memory. My dad sat at the head of the table with a glass of iced tea, looking unusually serious. Alex and his wife were already there, leaning toward each other, whispering in low voices before straightening up when they saw me. Alex's eyes flicked over me the way they always did when he was measuring whether I came in soft or strong. His wife didn't smile, not really. She wore that careful look like she was bracing for impact, but still hoping the room would side with them. And my mom, hovering near the kitchen like she was hosting a show, greeted me with a sweetness that felt practiced. Ethan had offered to come, but I didn't bring him. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't want them to twist it. I could already hear my mom's voice saying I was bringing outsiders into family matters, like I hadn't spent years being the outsider inside my own house. We sat down, and for the first 20 minutes, it was surface-level chatter. My mom asked about my business, then quickly moved on to the neighbors. My dad mentioned a leak in the garage roof. Alex made a half-hearted joke about traffic. Everyone acted like the air wasn't loaded, like there wasn't a silent agenda sitting at the table with us, waiting for its turn to speak. I could feel it building. My mom kept glancing at me like she was checking the angle of her shot. Alex kept shifting in his chair like he was bored, like he couldn't wait for the part where he got what he wanted. His wife kept touching her napkin, folding and unfolding it, a nervous habit that made me think she understood more than she admitted. Finally, my mom put down her fork and said, "Families shouldn't let small misunderstandings turn into big problems." She didn't say my name, but her eyes stayed on me the entire time. She went on about how life was too short for grudges, how everyone makes mistakes when they're trying to be funny, how we should all just move forward. The words were gentle. The message wasn't. The message was simple. Let it go. Fix it. Pay again. Be the one who keeps things steady. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because I knew if I spoke, she would turn my words into an argument about tone, about respect, about how I was escalating. That was always the trap. They didn't care what you said. They cared whether you said it in a way that kept them comfortable. Before I could even decide how to respond, my dad set his fork down with a deliberate clink that cut through the room like a warning. He turned to Alex and said, "You should have thought before you opened your mouth at that party. You embarrassed your sister in front of everyone, and you're lucky all she did was pull her money." The room froze. Alex stared at him like he'd misheard. My mom's eyebrows shot up like my dad had just switched sides in the middle of a chess game. Alex's wife dropped her gaze to her plate and didn't move. And for a second, I felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Not relief exactly, but shock. Because my dad almost never challenged Alex directly. My father was a quiet man, the kind who believed keeping the peace was the same thing as being strong. But the way he looked at Alex in that moment, there was weight in it. Like he'd been watching this dynamic for years, and finally couldn't pretend it was normal. Alex tried to recover, leaning back in his chair with that lazy confidence he used when he wanted to act like none of it mattered. "It was a joke," he said. "Minnie's taking it too seriously. She knows I didn't mean anything by it." My dad didn't let him finish. He told him hiding behind "just kidding" was the oldest trick in the book. He said if Alex respected me at all, he would have apologized right after it happened, not waited until I cut him off financially. He didn't raise his voice, but his tone made it clear he wasn't debating. This wasn't a conversation. This was a verdict. That's when my mom jumped in. She leaned toward my dad like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. She said, "That's just how siblings are." She said I knew Alex was joking, and I was the one making a mountain out of nothing. Then she looked at me and said I'd gone too far. Alex, sensing backup, folded his arms and stayed quiet, letting her fight for him. He even smirked at one point like this was going exactly the way he planned, except for my dad's part. That smirk did something to me. It made the night of my graduation replay in my mind. The laughter. The little smirks from people who thought the joke carried truth. My mother smiling like it was cute. It wasn't cute. It was a pattern. I didn't respond to any of it. There was no point. They had already decided I was the problem because I stopped playing the role they expected from me. So I pushed my plate forward, stood up, and told them I wasn't explaining myself again. The silence as I walked to the door was heavy, but I didn't look back. I could hear my mom inhale like she was about to call me dramatic. I could hear Alex shift in his chair like he was waiting for my dad to fix me, and I could feel my dad's eyes on my back. Not angry, not even disappointed, just tired. Like he was seeing something clearly for the first time and realizing he should have seen it sooner. When I got outside, the cold air hit my face and my hands shook slightly as I unlocked my car. I sat there for a moment, not driving, just breathing, because my heart was pounding the way it does when you've been holding yourself together too tightly for too long. When I got home, Ethan called. I hadn't told him I was leaving early, but he heard it in my voice the second I answered. "Did they do it?" he asked. "Did they try to make it your fault?" "Yes," I said, and it came out like a laugh that didn't have any humor in it. And the worst part is, they weren't even subtle. Ethan was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Listen to me. The people who benefit from your silence will always call you loud when you finally speak." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until my throat tightened, because part of me still wanted to believe my mother would wake up and say, "You're right," he crossed a line. Part of me still wanted to believe Alex would feel shame, but the dinner proved something darker. Alex didn't need my money as much as he needed control, and my mother didn't want fairness as much as she wanted the family to look intact. I thought that was the end of their intervention. I underestimated them. 3 days later, Alex and my mom teamed up for something I didn't see coming. Not a phone call, not a heartfelt apology, a stunt designed to corner me, embarrass me, and force me to take care of them again, whether I wanted to or not. It was a weekday morning. I was coming back from a meeting with a potential investor, my mind still half on numbers and projections, when I spotted a large white moving truck parked directly in front of my apartment building. For a second, I thought it was a neighbor. Someone finally leaving, someone starting over. Then my stomach sank, because I saw Alex standing at the back of the truck, directing two movers like he owned the place. His wife was on the sidewalk holding a cardboard box labeled kitchen, wearing that tight smile people put on when they're trying to act casual about something that's anything but. And Alex, the moment he saw me, broke into a grin like he was throwing me a surprise party. "Perfect timing," he said, clapping his hands together. "We're just about to start unloading." I stared at him. "Unloading where?" He tilted his head toward my building like it was obvious. "What do you think? Your second bedroom's been empty since you moved in. We figured we'd crash here for a couple of weeks. Just until we get settled." The way he said it made my skin crawl. Like my home was a resource he could claim. Like my space was a favor he was entitled to. Like my no didn't matter unless he decided it did. "No," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just said it once, clean and flat, because I believed grown adults should understand a boundary the first time they hear it. Alex laughed like I was playing along. He turned toward the movers and told them to start bringing things inside. I stepped in front of the building entrance. "No, you're not moving in here." His wife shifted the box in her arms and tried to jump in, explaining how their condo's new landlord had decided not to renew their lease. How everything happened so fast they didn't have time to find a new place. She said it was temporary. She said we're family. Then I noticed something over her shoulder, and the last bit of doubt died in me. My mom's car was parked halfway down the block. She was leaning against the driver's side door, arms crossed, sunglasses on, watching like a general overseeing a battle she had already decided she was going to win. So this wasn't desperation, this was planned. I turned back to Alex. "This isn't happening." He tried the guilt angle immediately. He said I was being cruel. He said they had nowhere else to go. He said his kid didn't deserve to be caught in the middle. The way he said it was calculated, like he wanted the movers to hear, like he wanted the neighbors to hear, like he wanted the story to start forming before I even refused. I told him there were plenty of other relatives they could call, and if there weren't, maybe that said something about how they treated people. That's when my mom strolled up, slow and deliberate. She didn't yell, but her voice was sharp enough to cut. She told me I was turning my back on my own blood, and if I let them walk away today, I'd regret it more than I could imagine. I looked at her and felt something settle inside me, something that wasn't anger anymore, but certainty. "The only regret I've had," I said, "is letting things get this far in the first place." Then I turned to the movers. "You unload anything into this building, it's getting put right back in the truck at his expense." The movers looked at each other. One of them asked Alex quietly if they should head back to the storage unit. Alex swore under his breath. His wife stared down at her shoes. After a long pause, Alex waved them off, furious, defeated, embarrassed. They packed everything back into the truck. My mom didn't say another word as she walked back to her car, but the look she gave me promised this wasn't over. And Alex, right before he climbed into the cab, stared at me like he wanted to memorize my face as an enemy. That night at exactly 11:04 p.m., I got a text from Alex. "You're going to regret this more than you think." I didn't reply. 2 days later, I found out what he meant. And it wasn't about money. It was personal, very personal. 2 mornings later, I woke up to my phone vibrating so hard it rattled against my nightstand. At first, I thought it was work. A supplier issue, a client panicking, something normal, something manageable. But when I opened my eyes and saw the flood of notifications, my stomach tightened in a way I hadn't felt before. It wasn't emails, it wasn't work. It was social media. Missed calls stacked on top of each other, dozens of direct messages, over 100 tag notifications. Names I hadn't seen in years lighting up my screen like ghosts. People I barely remembered sending screenshots without context, as if they expected me to already know what I was looking at. Alex had gone public. On Facebook, he had written a post that read like a badly scripted drama. He talked about betrayal, about family turning their backs, about how his own sister had kicked him, his wife, and his child onto the street when they had nowhere else to go. He painted himself as a man just trying to survive, and me as a cold, selfish businesswoman who forgot where she came from the moment money touched her hands. Every detail that made him look bad was missing. He didn't mention the startup I had funded. He didn't mention the year and more that I paid their mortgage. He didn't mention the shared loan account or the development team. He didn't mention the moving truck stunt or my mother watching from the sidewalk like this was a planned performance. And of course, he didn't mention the graduation party, the microphone, the laughter, the way he cut me down in front of everyone who mattered to me. By the time I finished reading, the post had already been shared nearly 60 times. Some comments were cautious, people who could tell something didn't add up, but most weren't. Family friends, old neighbors, distant relatives I barely remembered chimed in like moral judges. Family is forever. Blood should come before business. And the ones that hit hardest weren't from strangers. They were from people I went to school with. People who knew nothing about my life now, but loved the story anyway. Guess money changes people. Wow, didn't think you were like this. I put my phone down and sat there in silence, feeling something shift inside me. Not sadness, not even anger. It was clarity, because Alex wasn't just lying. He was controlling the story the same way he always had. And if I stayed quiet, the lie would become the truth. By noon, my mom had left 3 voicemails, each one angrier than the last. She didn't ask if any of it was true. She didn't ask what actually happened. She didn't care. All she cared about was how it made the family look and how I needed to fix it. That's when I knew I wasn't going to play defense anymore. The next morning, I texted Alex. "Meet me at the condo, noon. No emojis, no explanation, just the time and place." He replied 5 minutes later with a thumbs up, like he thought this was me finally breaking, like he thought I was coming to apologize. When I got there, I let myself in. I had my own key, another detail people love to ignore. I was already sitting at the kitchen table when he walked in, wearing that smug expression he always used when he thought he had the upper hand. I had a neat stack of papers laid out in front of me. Bank statements, loan documents, transfer records, every payment I had made toward his mortgage, every deposit into the startup, every expense I had covered, lined up clean and undeniable. He looked at the papers, then at me. "What's this?" he said, like he already knew but wanted to hear me say it. "I'm giving you a choice," I said calmly. I didn't yell. I didn't lecture. I slid the stack across the table toward him. "You take down that post today and put up a correction, or I send copies of these to every single person who shared it. Family, friends, investors, everyone." He laughed at first, a short, dismissive sound. "You wouldn't actually do that." I picked up my phone and showed him the draft message I had already written, complete with screenshots attached and names tagged. His expression changed so fast it almost felt physical. The smirk vanished. His shoulders stiffened. For the first time since the party, he looked nervous. "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice didn't match the words. "I'm not," I said, "and you know it." He stared at the papers for a long moment. I could see the calculations happening in his head. How far the lie could go. How fast it would collapse if the truth followed it. He didn't apologize. He didn't admit he was wrong. He just stood up, grabbed his phone, and walked into the other room. That night, the post disappeared. No apology, no follow-up, no explanation. just gone. Like it never existed. Like he could erase damage by pretending it never happened. And in that moment, I understood something important. Alex wasn't capable of accountability, only retreat. I thought maybe that would be the end of it, that maybe he'd finally back off now that he knew I wasn't afraid to expose the truth. I was wrong, because the following week, I made a move he never saw coming. That Friday morning, I sat in the downtown office of a lawyer I trusted and signed the final paperwork to invest in my friend Chris's startup. Chris was someone I had known since my sophomore year of college. He wasn't flashy. He didn't promise the moon. He didn't play the victim when things got hard. For 2 years, he had been building his platform on his own dime, working nights at a warehouse just to keep funding it. Months earlier, he had asked if I'd consider coming in as a partner. Back then, I told him I couldn't. My money was tied up with Alex's project. Now, my resources were free, and I wanted them invested in something real. When the ink dried, I felt a calm I hadn't felt in months. That afternoon, I called my dad and asked if he wanted to meet for coffee. We sat by the window of a small cafe, sunlight cutting across the table. I slid the signed agreement toward him. He read it carefully, then nodded. "Good," he said. "At least it's going to someone who's earned it." By evening, the news had reached my mom. I didn't have to guess how. Alex must have called her the second he found out. She left 2 voicemails back to back, both saying almost the same thing. That I was humiliating my brother, that I was choosing a stranger over family, that I was being spiteful. An hour later, Alex texted me, "Wow, guess you really are done." I didn't reply. 2 days later, I drove back to the condo for one last conversation. I wanted it face to face so there would be no room for him to twist my words later. When I walked in, Alex was on the couch scrolling on his phone. His wife sat at the dining table paying bills. Neither of them looked surprised to see me. I stood there until Alex finally looked up. "I'm going to make this simple," I said. "From this point on, your life is in your hands. No more loans, no more bills covered, no shared accounts. Whatever happens from here, you handle it. I'm done." For a moment, he stared at me like he was waiting for the punchline, like he thought I'd blink. His wife glanced between us but didn't say a word. Then Alex laughed, not because it was funny, because he didn't know what else to do. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. I didn't answer. I walked out down the hall and didn't look back. That night, sitting in my apartment, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. Blood isn't enough. You can be related to someone without actually being family. And once you see that clearly, there's no going back. The weeks after I walked out of Alex's condo felt strange, like my life had suddenly gone quiet in a way I wasn't used to. No late-night calls asking for help. No casual texts easing into requests. No messages from my mom reminding me how much Alex was struggling and how much easier things would be if I just stepped in again. For the first time in years, my phone stayed silent for the right reasons. Ethan noticed it before I fully did. One night, while we were sitting on my couch eating takeout, straight from the containers, he looked at me and said, "You're breathing differently." I laughed and asked what that even meant, but he was right. I wasn't constantly bracing for the next problem Alex would drop in my lap. I wasn't mentally calculating how much money I could afford to lose to keep everyone calm. My energy was finally going into my own life, my own work, my own relationship. Chris's startup was moving faster than either of us expected. The beta test feedback was strong, and we had a meeting scheduled with a serious investor. The kind of meeting Alex always talked about but never actually landed. Every hour I put into it felt clean, earned. There was no chaos attached. No emotional debt lurking underneath. But a part of me stayed alert, because I knew Alex too well to believe he would disappear quietly. He didn't know how to sit with failure. He didn't know how to rebuild honestly, and he definitely didn't know how to let go of a story where he wasn't the victim. That tension paid off one Tuesday morning. I was getting ready for work when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Check your mailbox. You'll want to see this. L." No profile picture, no context, just that. I stood there for a moment, phone in my hand, weighing whether this was another trap or something worse. Then curiosity won. I went downstairs and opened the metal mailbox in the lobby. Wedged inside was a thick, unmarked envelope. The moment I felt its weight, my stomach dropped. I carried it upstairs and opened it at my kitchen table. Inside were printed screenshots, email threads, clean, unmistakable, time-stamped proof. The more I read, the slower I turned the pages. Alex had been emailing two of my former business contacts, people I had introduced him to back when I still believed in his project. In his messages, he pitched a relaunch of the startup we once worked on together. Except in his version, it was entirely his idea. He had stripped my name from every detail. He claimed he personally designed and funded the early prototypes. The same prototypes I paid for, the same designs I developed through my network. Worse, he had attached those designs, my designs, files I recognized instantly. I sat back in my chair, the room feeling suddenly too small. This wasn't just lying. This wasn't just pride or desperation. This was theft, and it confirmed something I'd been trying not to admit. Alex didn't just feel entitled to my money, he felt entitled to my work, my ideas, my reputation. I didn't know who Elle was, but based on how these emails landed in my hands, I had a feeling it was someone close enough to Alex to finally get tired of watching him burn people, someone who decided to stop protecting him. I didn't waste time. That afternoon, I forwarded everything to my lawyer. Then I made two very specific phone calls, one to each investor Alex had contacted. I didn't rant, I didn't dramatize. I laid out the real history of the project. Who paid for what? Who owned what? How the attached designs were my intellectual property. By the end of the week, Alex's pitch was dead. The investors cut contact completely. No negotiations, no second chances. They wanted nothing to do with him. I expected Alex to call me furious, to leave threatening voicemails, to explode the way he always did when control slipped out of his hands. But he didn't. Instead, my mom called. Her voice was sharp from the start. She accused me of ruining his future, of kicking him when he was already down, of being vindictive and cruel. She didn't ask if the emails were real. She didn't want proof. She didn't want to hear how he'd tried to steal my work. All she cared about was that I had stopped him from getting another lifeline. This is what happens, I told her, when you burn every bridge you have and then try to steal wood from someone else's to rebuild yours. She hung up on me. The following Monday, Chris and I closed our first round of funding. The same people who once thought Alex's project had potential were now backing something built on actual work. That night, I poured myself a drink and sat on my couch, staring at the city lights outside my window. Alex hadn't changed. He never would. The only difference now was that he no longer had access to me. No money, no labor, no silence he could hide behind. For the first time, I felt safe from his chaos. And I thought finally this chapter was over. I was wrong. Because Alex wasn't finished trying to punish me for walking away, and the final move he made wouldn't be loud or public or dramatic. It would be quiet, calculated, and meant to hurt me where he thought I was most exposed. The message from that unknown number stayed in my mind longer than I expected, not because of what it said, but because of what it implied. Someone had been watching Alex closely enough to know exactly what he was doing, and they were close enough to get proof. That meant his lies weren't just reckless anymore, they were desperate. For a few days after the investors cut him off, Alex went silent. No calls, no texts, no indirect messages sent through my mom. That kind of silence from him was unnatural. Alex never processed loss quietly. He either blamed someone loudly or tried to manipulate his way back in. I knew better than to believe he had accepted anything. Then, one afternoon, my mom showed up at my door unannounced. I hadn't told her where I'd be. I hadn't invited her. When I opened the door and saw her standing there, purse clutched tight against her chest, I already knew this wasn't a visit built on understanding. It was built on pressure. She didn't sit down. She didn't ask how I was. She launched straight into it, saying Alex was spiraling, that he couldn't sleep, that he was embarrassed, that people were turning their backs on him. She said I had gone too far this time, that this wasn't about business anymore, it was about destroying him. I listened without interrupting, because I wanted to hear how far she'd go without once asking what he had done to me. When she finished, I said something she clearly didn't expect. I didn't destroy Alex, I just stopped protecting him from himself. Her face hardened. She said family doesn't do that to each other. She said I was cold. She said she didn't raise me to abandon my own blood. That's when I realized something painful but freeing. My mother didn't want the truth. She wanted the version of reality where Alex was always redeemable and I was always responsible. And nothing I said was going to change that. So I told her this was the last conversation we were having about Alex. I told her I wasn't discussing my finances, my work, or my choices ever again. And if she couldn't respect that, then she would lose access to me too. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. You'd cut off your own mother, she said. I'm not cutting you off, I replied. I'm stepping back. There's a difference. She left without saying goodbye. That night, Ethan held me while I cried in a way I hadn't allowed myself to before. Not because I missed Alex, but because I finally accepted that the family I wanted didn't exist the way I had imagined it, and grieving that truth hurt more than any argument ever had. A few days later, my lawyer called. He told me Alex had attempted to register a variation of the original startup name under a different entity, trying to skate just close enough to my intellectual property without crossing the line outright, close enough to confuse, close enough to borrow credibility, close enough to stay connected to my work. That was the moment I stopped reacting and started finishing things. Within a week, my lawyer sent a formal cease and desist. Not emotional, not aggressive, just airtight. It laid out ownership, documentation, timelines, and consequences. It made it very clear that if Alex crossed that line again, there would be no warning. He never responded. Not to me, not to the lawyer, not publicly, not privately. Weeks passed, then a month. Chris's company continued to grow. New hires, new milestones, new conversations that didn't involve damage control or guilt. For the first time, I was building something without having to apologize for it. Ethan and I started talking about moving in together. Quiet plans, healthy plans, the kind that didn't require permission from anyone else. One evening, as I was sorting through old mail, I came across the envelope again, the one that started everything. I looked at it for a long time, thinking about the person who sent it. L. Whoever they were, they didn't save Alex. They didn't protect him. They chose truth over loyalty, and I understood why. Because protecting someone who refuses to change doesn't make you compassionate. It makes you complicit. I never heard from Alex again. No apology, no reconciliation, no dramatic confrontation to close the loop, just absence. And in that absence, I found peace. I used to think family was about endurance, about how much you could tolerate and still call it love. I was wrong. Family is about respect, and when respect disappears, blood doesn't mean much at all. The door between Alex and me didn't slam shut. It closed quietly, locked, cleanly, and I didn't stand on the other side hoping he'd knock. For the first time in my life, I walked forward without looking back.